Good morning, and thank you for joining me on my podcast, Unclassed. I'm your host, Andrew Vigil, and I appreciate your time. Today, I wanted to give a little bit of a background, some context to who I am uh, as a teacher and why I'm kind of taking a step out to create a podcast to enlighten people a little bit about the things that are going on in the educational world today. So, I want to start in my early years, my primary years when I was in elementary. I was always kind of a slow learner. I took a little bit longer to grasp key concepts, um, depending on the subject. It took a little bit longer than others, but for the most part, in comparison to the other students in my class, my elementary years were kind of spent trying to catch up to some of the other students, to a lot of the other students. I was able to learn, just not at the pace that was set for us by the teacher. So all through elementary school, I was kind of just trying to stay afloat, just trying to learn what I needed to learn, um, as quickly as I could, even though it was a little bit of a slower pace. Enter middle school. That was the pace of learning for me was still a little bit slow, but now we add in feeling kind of lost. I was really short. I was usually one of the shortest kids in my class. So now here in New Mexico, middle school, sixth through eighth grade, and I was still really a small kid. So now not only was I try to figure out how to stay afloat in the classroom, um, now I was the discrepancy in my size compared to some of the other boys was really accentuated. Um, I grew up playing baseball, basketball, soccer, and I was really good at those sports. And then I got into the middle school years, and things just kind of shifted for me. I was really aware of how much bigger my classmates were, again, especially the boys. Um, and so there was like an awkwardness, just this feeling of, I have no idea where I fit in. I have no idea where I belong. And so for me, my middle school years were probably the hardest to, I don't know if I want to say endure, but they were hard. They were definitely my tougher years, K through 12. Um, and then when I got to high school, I grew a little bit, so I wasn't the shortest anymore. I was still short, but not the shortest. Um, and I kind of found my groove. Started making a lot of friends, and I was still not a very good student. I What I did was I kind of put on this class clown kind of hat. I kind of wore that hat to kind of hide the fact that I was still a little bit slow in class. So I kind of tried to draw attention that way, hopefully not exposing um, my ineptitude in the classroom. Um, but high school was fun. That's where I started going to games and hanging out with people, and it was a fun time. That was that was by far the best experience, especially junior and senior year of high school. Um, so that's a little bit about my educational background. Again, I went from kind of just like slow learner to kind of just lost and trying to figure out where I fit in to knowing where I fit in, but it wasn't in an educational sense. It was more of a social sense. And maybe me lacking that in elementary and middle school is what exacerbated the whole social aspect of high school for me. But what the reason why I mention my K through 12 years is because I didn't know, I went to good schools, but I didn't know any of my teachers very well. Um, when I was going to school in the 80s and 90s, the schools I went to, again, I had good teachers. I went to good schools, and they were there to teach their subject, and that was it. They were there to teach their subject. So I didn't know any of their interests. I didn't know who they were as people. Um, I didn't know anything about them. You just show up to class, they teach your subject, and then class is over. And maybe that's exactly why I am the way I am as a teacher is because of those experiences where I didn't connect. I didn't have any relationship with any of my teachers. And so the title of this podcast is called My Calling because like I've alluded to in my previous podcast, I didn't choose teaching. At the beginning, I didn't think about becoming a teacher. It was not on my radar. I wanted to own my own business. My uncle had a couple of restaurants in another city in New Mexico, and I kind of liked that lifestyle. No boss, create your own hours, make a lot of money. And obviously, not every business owner has that lifestyle, but that's what I wanted. Teaching was not on my radar. Took business classes in college, and um, I thought I was trending well. I thought I kind of had everything mapped out the way I want. Um, and then I took a subbing assignment one day. Now I've worked since I was 14, 15 years old. I've always had a job. I've always worked. So working was just something I always needed to do. And it was in the middle of my college years, and someone told me I should be a substitute teacher. And I didn't brush them off, but I kind of chuckled because I was awful to my substitute teachers. Um, I was not someone, I gave all my substitute teachers a hard time. So initially I thought, yeah, probably not, because the idea of going into a school I've never been into, in a classroom that's not mine, with kids I don't know, and then knowing what I did and how I treated my substitute teachers, I thought that that's not going to happen. But I needed a job. I needed to work, and I thought, at the time, I think it was like $80 a day, and that wasn't bad um, for the late '90s. And I thought, well, I'm there about 6 hours. I'll make about $80. I could still work on schoolwork while I'm subbing, because most teachers just give busy work to their subs. Um, so I thought, why not? Again, my mind was set on business. That's what I wanted to do. So um, I thought, why not? And I walked into Lynn Middle School in Las Cruces, New Mexico. Um, a little bit nervous, But it was middle school. I think I'd have been more nervous if it was high school. But it was middle school, and I was expecting the worst, to be honest. And I don't remember what the subject was, but one of the things I noticed the most was all these students had trapper keepers binders with the clear plastic on the top, and a lot of them had pictures of people. Um, and so I asked some of them. I asked who those people were, and um, I just assumed they were like happy family photos. But what I got was so and so OD'd, so and so was incarcerated, so and so was deported back to Mexico. Um, it was just kind of like a tribute to all these people that were removed from these students' lives. So that was a real eye-opening experience for me. I don't know, like that wasn't a thing when I was in middle school. I didn't know anyone whose parents were killed or who OD'd or who were deported or who were incarcerated. Not that that didn't happen. I just didn't know about it, and they weren't highlighted on people's folders when I was in school. So that was a real eye-opening experience for me. I thought, wow, okay. So, and Las Cruces, for those that don't know, it's about 2 hours, maybe hour and a half from the Mexico border. In Juarez is so it's not El Paso's the border town, but we're not far from El Paso. Um, so that was something that really kind of stuck with me. And I spent the rest of the day with these middle school kids that I didn't know, in a classroom I didn't know, in a school I didn't know. And I left, as I was leaving the parking lot, I thought how cool that day was. Because whatever assignments I passed out that day, I don't remember. But it allowed me a chance to kind of talk with the kids. And it was through those conversations with the kids that just really left just a great feeling in me when I left. And I thought, I like subbing. I don't think it was more than that. I don't think it was more than just subbing. So as I became a permanent sub at Lynn Middle School, and when you're a permanent sub, usually they call on you when they need subs. And so as I subbed more, I got to know the administrators and secretaries and custodians more. I got to know the teachers more, the students more. And the more I was in those classrooms and in those hallways, just the better the better it felt. And there was one of the things that will always stick with me. My last podcast was on the power of words. And I want to mention here that that's never been truer than when I met this one little boy. I don't think he was in my class. I think I was just walking in the cafeteria, and I think he was a sixth grader. He was a really small little guy, and I always talk to all the kids, even if I don't have them or they weren't in my class. And I noticed his little polo shirt. The schools had uniforms, and it was buttoned up right at the Adam's apple. I mean, it was right at the top. But I also noticed that there was a pretty wide scar um, right above that he was not able to hide. So it was clear he was trying to hide his open heart surgery scar. Now, coming from my brother, he had multiple open heart surgeries. And back in the 70s and early 80s, those open heart surgery scars were not discreet. They're wide. Um, the surgeries back then are not like the surgeries now. They left a much um, deeper scar, not as clean of a scar. So, but I remember growing up, my brother, he was very self conscious about his open heart surgery scar, and so he had a lot of fun with that when people would ask, when the few people that saw him with his shirt off for his scar. And one was a chainsaw accident, one was a shark attack. I think one was mauled by a bear. I don't remember, but he had fun with the stories of his scar. And so right away I asked this little boy, I said, did you happen to have open heart surgery by chance? And he kind of just looked down, almost like, how did he know? How was he able to see? And he said yes. And I said, well, bud, I said, girls really like scars. And I paused, and he looked up, and he said, they do? And I said, yes. I said, girls really like scars. It's really manly and cool looking. And it completely changed the demeanor of this little guy. And I said, in fact, I have a brother who had open heart surgery. And usually, especially in sixth grade, you don't really know. I don't know if my brother, I don't know anyone else that had open heart surgery when I was growing up. So I can't imagine he knew of others that had open heart surgery. So you're probably thinking you're the only one that's ever had open heart surgery. So for him to know that my brother had open heart surgery made him feel like he wasn't alone, right? So I said, yeah. I said, oh man, he had fun with it. He talked about bear attacks and shark attacks and chainsaw accidents. And this kid was just eating it up, right? Like you could tell the wheels were spinning in his head about what he could start telling people. So anyway, I said, so hey, don't be embarrassed about that. Not one bit. And then I carried on. I think I went to the cafeteria, got something to eat or whatnot. And a couple hours later, when school was getting out, I was walking to my car and I saw that same little guy getting on the bus, but he wasn't hiding that scar any longer. His every single button on that polo shirt was popped open, and it was just like he was. I don't know if I would say he was showing off his scar, but boy, he was not embarrassed about it any longer. And I thought, wow, that what I'm doing here has a big effect on these kids, on these people. So that really got the wheels turning. I thought, man, that was really cool. And it wasn't long when I realized this is what I want to do every single day. This is where I want to be. And of course, it didn't dawn on me before, but I come through a long line of teachers. My mom is a retired teacher. Both her parents were retired teachers. My dad's uncle has an elementary school named after him because he was administrator there. My dad wanted to be a teacher. And so I was just thinking, like, why wasn't teaching on my radar, considering how many teachers were in my family? And so I knew right then, this is what I want to do. This is where I want to be. These are the kids. And if you can say that, subbing a middle school, because at some point I thought, well, if I really want to be a teacher, then I'm going to keep subbing, and I want to sub high school. I want to sub different subjects because I really want to know if this is what I want to do before I go into that. And I loved every bit of it. And the thing I learned early on is the power of relationships, because it was through that relationship building that I was able to learn about the kids and speak into them. And as I was at a teacher training a week ago, I ran into a former student of mine who's been a teacher now for 8 years. And she was one of my first high school classes. And I didn't know what I was doing. I was winging it. I'd never taught before, especially high school. And I told this young lady, I said, yeah, I was kind of lost. I kind of was, I didn't, I was a first year high school teacher. I didn't know what I was doing. And she said, well, the one thing I learned about your class that I take into my classes is the power of relationships, because she said the relationship building was key in different hard times in her life. And she said it was just the relationships that we had with you that I incorporate as a teacher. And that was what got me into teaching. That's what sustained me as a teacher. And that's what's keeping me in the classroom through all the ups and downs of teaching, is the relationships that I have with my students. And one powerful example or testimony of that is when I was teaching at a pretty well-to-do middle school in Albuquerque. And this was my first year of teaching. It was 2003, and it was having my own class. And it wasn't long before I realized that the administration was giving me the students that the other teachers did not want in their class. Either most of them were just disruptive. They were behavior problems. These veteran teachers just didn't want the students that were going to challenge them or that didn't sit still and listen. So it didn't take long before I would look around my classroom and I realized, okay, there's a lot of really needy students in my class. When I say needy, I mean there were just all sorts of needs that needed to be met with different kids. But they all did well with me. They weren't problem students like they were with the other teachers. I had no problem with these students. And I believe it's because of the relationships that I had with them. I listened to them. I let them talk. I shared stuff about myself. So through those relationships, I never had any discipline issues. So, and another one of my biggest moments when I realized, or one of the catalysts of why I am so transparent in my classroom, was one fall day, and I had a student that was later going to get suspended for drugs. He was looking at my college degrees on my classroom wall, because I read in a book that, if doctors have their degrees on their walls, and lawyers and all these other professions that have their degrees on the wall, why don't teachers have degrees on their walls? And after I read that, I thought, you know what, I'm gonna put my degrees on my walls, because they're absolutely right. We're professionals. And this one kid named Ryan, he was just really looking at my degrees, and he thought, wow, this is really cool, Mr. Vigil. And I thought, yeah, like what's so cool about it? And he said, well, I just struggle a lot in school, and I could see you have a bachelor's degree and a master's degree, and I'm sure it was just so easy for you. And I chuckled. I said, no. I said, actually, it's the absolute opposite. I said, I flunked out of college. Like, the school told me I can't come back that following semester because of how low my GPA was. I said, I dropped out. I changed majors. I said, it was a very, very long and hard ride for me to get those degrees. I said, so no, it was really hard for me to get. And it was just like this light bulb shine in his head. Like, cause I think he thought, like a lot of those kids, school came easy for teachers. Teachers know everything, and nothing's further from the truth. And so from that moment on, I realized, okay, I need to start sharing some of my background with these kids, because the kids that are struggling, the kids that don't fit in, the kids that need a connection need a teacher that can provide them that. Because I was the slow learner. I was a kid that didn't fit in. I was a kid that didn't know any of my teachers, so I didn't have any connection with any of them. And so that really informed the way I am in the classroom and how I teach. And so I do get the kids that say, Mr. Vigil, I ditch every single class except yours. I don't want to miss your class. And I chuckle and I tell them that they shouldn't ditch all the other classes, but I feel special. I'm honored that they don't want to miss my class. But I get the kids that share with me some of the things they're going through, some of their struggles. And I catch those kids that, to be honest, the other teachers don't want. I get so many kids, and even if they don't have me for a class, they just want to be in my classroom. They know I'll listen. And so I get the, Mr. Veal, you're my favorite teacher I've ever had, and I never had you. And I'm like, and I feel like I've had you for 4 years, because, and I never had you once, but I feel like I've known you for 4 years. So my experiences as a student greatly informed how I teach. But the relationship piece that my former student talked about, that she brings into her classroom, it's just so important. And so the title of this podcast being My Calling, it's interesting because it wasn't something I ever thought about doing. It wasn't on my radar, but things have a way of working out the way, you know, that we're supposed to fill. I believe we're supposed to fill needs. We're supposed to help people fill needs, and that's exactly where I found myself. So that is kind of my testimony on how I ended up in the classroom. And again, there's a lot of things that come up that make me question how long I can do this, or if I can keep going. And then usually I get students that come to my classroom or show up, and we talk, and it just confirms the need that these students have, and especially more so after COVID. But when I talk about teaching, finding me, teaching, calling me, this profession calling me, it's 100% accurate. So that's a little bit about me. That's how I am as a teacher. That's how I was as a student. And if there's anything I can pass on, I believe it would be the power of storytelling, the power of your testimony, sharing who you are with people, or your kids, especially your kids, because I was one of those that I just assumed I was one of those that the teachers know everything. My parents were perfect. Um, I didn't know too many details about any of the adults or authority in my life. And I think that can be a disadvantage for a lot of kids, especially now, especially with technology and social media, when kids are feeling even more lost than they ever have. I think if they know that teachers aren't perfect and parents aren't perfect, and if you're an adult figure, an authority figure, you're not perfect. And if you can kind of set pride aside for a little bit and get real with some of the young people you're around, it would encourage them and help them not feel so alone. And maybe it would give them someone that they can talk to when things are going when things are hard for them. So that will wrap up this episode. Again, I can't thank you enough for sharing a little bit of your day with me. Um, I will see you next Wednesday. Thank you. God bless.